Hello, everyone. Marissa here with the fifth Sunday of Lent. So, everybody, we are almost there. We are more than halfway through Lent, and we'll be able to tell that we're getting close to Holy Week and Easter based upon our readings today. So, our first reading comes from the Old Testament, right? And we're hearing from the prophet Jeremiah. Now, Jeremiah was called as a young man, as a teenager, by the Lord to be his prophet. And God was asking Jeremiah to remind the Hebrew people to stay true to the Ten Commandments, to stay true to their one God, the one God who brought them forth from the land of Egypt, who loves them and wants to be their God, and he wants them to be his people. But Jeremiah was given a hard task because sadly, the people were not following the Ten Commandments. They were worshiping idols, they were breaking God's law, and things were not going well for them. So God sends prophets like Jeremiah to warn the people to say, no, you're messing up. Turn back before things get worse. Unfortunately, the people, for the most part, did not listen to Jeremiah. But in this reading from the 31st chapter of Jeremiah, we hear these amazing words from Jeremiah that he's speaking to the people, that the Lord is telling them that he gave them a covenant. He made a promise with them, and he wrote them on tablets of stone, right? The Ten Commandments were written on stone. Stone can break. In fact, they broke once. Moses had to make them again. But Jeremiah is telling us in this reading that God is telling us that someday God's law wouldn't be on stone, it would be on our hearts. You guys know the difference between doing something that's right because you're told to do it, or doing something that's right and you do it out of love. It's kind of a difference. Either way, we should choose to do what's right, but when we do what's right out of love for ourselves and for others or for God, it brings joy to what we're doing, right? And others can see why we're doing what we're doing in a good way. So this covenant, this promise that Jeremiah is sharing with us from the Lord is that he's saying, hey, even though you guys aren't following my law right now, I am not giving up on you. In fact, I'm going to strengthen my covenant with you. That someday this covenant is not just going to be written on stone, it's actually going to be written on your hearts. So hang in there. I'm not giving up on you. So in the New Testament, when we start hearing from the second reading from Hebrews, and then our gospel comes from John, we start getting hints about how is God going to make a new covenant with us? How is he going to write his law on our heart? And the answer is through Jesus. And the way that Jesus ultimately achieves this new covenant is by everything that we're about to celebrate through Holy Week. So next Sunday, don't miss it. Next Sunday is Palm Sunday, the beginning of Holy Week, the final march that we travel with Jesus to his crucifixion and death, and then 3 days later to his resurrection. So we hear that from the book of Hebrews, the letter to the Hebrews, that we're going to suffer sometimes, and sometimes things are going to be hard. But sometimes when we suffer, especially if we do it out of love and in communion with God, God can make really, really beautiful things happen. And Jesus witnessed that for us, right? His dying, his suffering on the cross was cruel and horrible and painful. But the result of his death is the forgiveness of our sins. And eventually his resurrection 3 days later, which too means that all of us get to share in his resurrection someday. So in the Gospel of John, we hear Jesus tell a story. And he's talking about how a seed works. And he's saying that the only way for a seed that you plant in the ground, the only way for it to produce its fruit is for it to die. How strange does that sound to us, right? But it's through the death of that seed that new life is born. You and I experience that in our baptism. We died to original sin and we rose to new life as a new creation in Jesus Christ. And we as Christians continually go through this dying to sin, dying to things that separate us from God, and then rising to this newness of life. And hopefully this newness of life draws our hearts closer to the heart of the Lord, so that we're no longer just following rules for rules' sake. We're doing things out of love for God and for love of our neighbor, who we can see Christ in. So Jesus receives this amazing consolation. Like, the coolest thing happens in this gospel. It says that a couple people were talking to Jesus, and they heard a voice from heaven say, "I have glorified it and will glorify it again." They heard the voice of God. God is still speaking to us, everybody. And he's reminding us that he is working in his son's life, Jesus, and he's still working in our life through the church and through the sacraments. So we're coming towards the end of Lent. It's probably getting maybe a little bit harder to stick with whatever your Lenten sacrifice or whatever your Lenten offering is to the Lord. Stick with it. Those little hardships that we endure, think about Jesus carrying that cross. And do it for love of him. Do it for love of him, because as he was walking to Calvary, he was thinking of you. And he was loving you. You personally, not you collective, you personally. So continue to journey with him. Allow that little seed that he's planted in you to maybe die and then get watered and nurtured by his word and through his sacraments and through your loved ones around you leading you to the Lord, so that we can blossom into something beautiful and new this Easter together. Have a blessed 5th Sunday of Lent.